The snow didn't fall that night, it listened. That's the first thing I wrote in the log, even though I crossed it out immediately. Emergency reports are supposed to be factual, objective. But when you live in Holleridge long enough, you learn that facts bend in winter. If you've never heard of Holleridge, that's normal. We sit between two mountain ranges that block radio signals, cell towers, even weather satellites on bad days. Every winter, the town gets quieter, not just empty, but muted, like someone turned the volume knob on reality itself. No birds, no wind, even footsteps sound wrong, like they're being swallowed. I was the night shift radio operator that winter, midnight to 6, alone in the tower on the ridge above town, surrounded by antennas that groaned when the ice thickened on them. My job was simple: log incoming emergency calls, relay them to responders, keep records. At 8:59 p.m., the storm warning came through. Whiteout conditions expected, visibility approaching 0. I poured stale coffee and settled in. At 9:03, the radio crackled, not static, breathing. Then a voice, thin, confused. Dispatch. I think someone walked out of my house. I asked for the caller's name, address, standard procedure. There was a pause, long enough that I thought the signal had dropped. Then the voice said, "I'm still in bed." That was the first cliff. I didn't realize it yet. The caller was a man named Arthur Bell, 68, lived alone on Creekside Road. He said he'd woken up to find his front door open. Snow had blown inside. And outside, leading away from the porch, were footprints. Not entering, leaving, barefoot. I asked if he'd sleepwalked. No, he said. They're too deep. Like whoever made them stood still for a while before walking. I logged it as a possible disturbance and told him to lock his door and stay inside until morning. When I checked the responder availability list, my stomach sank. Roads were already impassable. No one could reach him. At 9:19, another call came in. Different house, same street, same footprints. At 9:27, another. By 9:40, I had 7 reports, all identical. Doors found unlocked, snow untouched except for a single set of footprints leading away from each home, stopping somewhere out of sight. And every caller said the same thing when I asked if they'd gone outside. I was asleep. I pulled up the town map and started marking addresses. The pattern didn't radiate outward. It curved, slowly, like something tracing the town. At 10:11, the first missing person call came in. A woman named Lena Ortiz called crying, saying her husband wasn't in bed. His coat was still on the hook, his boots by the door, but outside. "Don't say footprints," I said. She went quiet. Then she whispered, "They stop in the middle of the field." That was when I noticed something I hadn't before. The footprints never crossed roads, never stepped on plowed ground. They only moved where the snow was fresh and untouched, as if whatever made them didn't want to be heard. At 10:46, the radio answered back without being spoken to. I was mid-sentence with a caller when my own voice came through the speaker, slightly delayed, slightly distorted. "Stay inside and lock your doors." I froze. The caller froze. Neither of us were transmitting. Then the radio spoke again. A woman's voice this time. "I'm cold." I recognized it instantly. She'd gone missing 3 winters ago. The official story was exposure, hypothermia during a solo hike, body never found. But the radio repeated her last emergency call word for word, right down to the timestamp. At 11:02, the footprints changed. Callers started reporting something new. Impressions in the snow that didn't move. Just 2 deep shapes, side by side, as if someone had stood there for hours, facing the houses, waiting. At 11:18, Arthur Bell called back. He was whispering. "They're outside," he said. I asked who. "All of them." I heard wind through his phone, snow crunching, then another sound. Footsteps, not outside, inside his house. The line went dead. That was the second cliff. By midnight, Holleridge had gone silent. No calls, no radio chatter. Even the storm seemed to pause, snow hanging in the air like frozen ash. Then the radio turned itself on. One by one, voices filled the room. Familiar, calm, precise. Missing persons, dead residents, people whose funerals I had attended. They weren't screaming. They weren't panicked. They were reporting. Addresses, conditions, temperatures, like dispatchers. And then one voice cut through them all. Mine. "Radio check," it said. "If anyone can hear me, respond." I didn't move. The voice continued, calmer than I'd ever sounded. "We're almost inside." At 1:07 a.m., the power went out. The backup generator kicked in, but the lights stayed dim. I grabbed a flashlight and looked out the tower window. That's when I saw the footprints. They were everywhere, hundreds of them, all leading uphill, all converging on the radio tower. But none of them were fresh. They were pressed deep into the snow like they'd been there for years. At 1:19, someone knocked on the tower door. 3 slow knocks. I didn't answer. The radio spoke again. "Open the door," it said, using my mother's voice. She died in this tower during a storm when I was 12. The knocking started again, harder now. I watched through the security camera as footprints appeared on the stairs, forming one by one, as if something invisible was climbing. At 1:33, the radio log updated itself. New entry, operator, present. I realized then what Hollow Ridge really was. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. By morning, the storm cleared. Rescue crews reached the tower to find the door open, the radio still on. No footprints led inside. But from the tower, fresh tracks stretched outward, into town. And every winter since, when the snow gets deep enough, the radio answers back, and something walks home.
Before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?
The heater started breathing before the building went dark. That's not poetic language. I wrote it down at 6:41 p.m. because I didn't know how else to describe the sound. Slow, rhythmic, wet in a way metal shouldn't be, like lungs working too hard. This is a documented account, not a story, not exaggeration. I kept timestamps, audio notes, temperature logs. I survived, so someone needs to know what really happened inside Greylock Apartments during the cold wave of January 14th, because Apartment 3B was never supposed to exist. The cold warning hit our phones that morning. Record-breaking, life-threatening exposure in minutes, the kind of alert you read twice. Greylock was an old building, pre-war construction, thin walls, ancient wiring, but we'd survived winters before, barely. By noon, the power flickered. By 4 p.m., it was gone. No lights, no elevators, no cell service inside the building, just emergency glow strips in the hallway, and the sound of people opening and closing doors, testing things that wouldn't work. At 5:12 p.m., the heaters began failing, one by one. You could hear it happen. A cough, a click, then silence. Apartment 1A first, then 2C. Then my neighbor across the hall, 4D, started screaming that her radiators were ice cold. I checked mine. Dead. I was already wearing 2 jackets when I stepped into the hallway. That's when I noticed something wrong. Heat, not everywhere, just drifting, like a current. It was strongest near the center stairwell, 3rd floor. Someone said it out loud first. 3B's still on. We all knew apartment 3B, or at least we thought we did. It was always quiet. No packages, no visitors. Door always closed, but warm air rolled out from under it like a promise. At 6:02, the first people sat down outside that door. They didn't knock. They just leaned against the wall, hands stretched toward the seam beneath the frame, listening to that hum. Slow, steady, breathing, cliff. By 6:40, there were 12 of us in the hallway. I started recording audio on my phone to save battery. Documentary habit. I asked names, ages, conditions. We were all rational people, teachers, accountants, a paramedic, nobody panicking yet. But the cold was wrong. You don't feel normal cold like that. It bites, yes, but this was hollow, like warmth was being removed, not cold added. At 7:05, I went back to my apartment to grab blankets. It was colder than outside. My thermostat read 29 degrees Fahrenheit. That's survivable, but barely. I wrapped myself in layers and returned to the hallway. When I sat near 3B, the relief was instant. My fingers stopped aching. My breath slowed. I remember thinking irrationally, this is too warm. That's when I checked my temperature log again. Hallway, near 3B, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. My apartment, 5 minutes later, 22 degrees Fahrenheit. That shouldn't be possible. At 7:48, someone knocked on 3B's door. The hum stopped. Everyone froze. Then it resumed. Louder. No one answered. At 8:15, the first tenant went back to their apartment to sleep. At 8:47, they didn't respond to knocks. By 9:02, the hallway was colder. Not freezing. Emptier. Like something had been taken. People began rotating. 15 minutes near the heater. Then back to their units. We joked nervously. Recharge sessions. No one laughed. At 9:33, I noticed something else. The heater wasn't just warm, it was hungry. Every time someone sat close, pressed their back to the door, the hum deepened, slower, satisfied. And when they left, it sharpened, faster, impatient. At 10:11, Mrs. Calder from 2B collapsed. Hypothermia symptoms, confusion, slurred speech. She kept asking why her bed was so far away. We moved her closer to 3B. The warmth came back instantly. Her breathing slowed. The heater hummed louder than ever. At 10:26, I checked the hallway wall. It was warm. At 10:27, I checked the wall inside my apartment. Ice cold. That's when I realized the heat wasn't being generated. It was being relocated, taken. At 11:04, someone asked the question we were all avoiding. Who lives in 3B? No one answered. We checked the mail slots. No name, no dust. Building records, stored in the lobby office, listed 3A, then 3C. No 3B. At 11:29, the humming changed rhythm. It synced with our breathing. At 11:42, the door handle turned from the inside. Not opened, just tested. By midnight, half the building was silent. Doors closed, lights off, people resting. We didn't check on them. We didn't want to leave the warmth. At 12:38 a.m., frost crept across the hallway walls, away from 3B, spreading outward like veins. The heater was louder now, wet. At 1:07, someone whispered, "It's full." At 1:08, the humming stopped, total silence. Then the door to 3B opened. There was no apartment inside, no furniture, no walls, just a small, ancient gas heater bolted into concrete, glowing orange-red like an exposed organ. The heat hit us in a wave, and behind us, down the hallway, frost exploded outward. Apartments flash froze. We heard glass shatter, pipes burst. Something else too, something soft. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. I just moved, down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the snow. When emergency crews arrived at dawn, they found bodies in beds, curled, peaceful, frozen solid. They found me half-conscious outside. They never found apartment 3B. The wall was freshly painted over, smooth, warm to the touch. And now, every winter, when the temperature drops too fast, I hear it again. From inside the walls, breathing, waiting for someone to sit down and warm themselves, just for a minute.
If this story gave you chills, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And tell us in the comments which part scared you the most, and drop your ideas in the comments. Your idea might be our next nightmare.